You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
In a world where a former sitting president can now be indicted for crimes that he actually committed and is on tape multiple times admitting so, welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim the Nerd coming at you another week here with the greatest legal mind in the Pacific Northwest with a bitchin' new haircut, Professor Aubrey.
Well, hello there.
Hi, we hear noises in the other room right now.
Yes, there are noises coming from the other room, which is something that is pretty much happening all the time at our house now. Because the kittens are always doing something wacky.
That they are. The couple things have been broken, which has not been fun, but nothing TV size or anything like that. Personal stuff. Unfortunately, your grandma's candy dish,
Right.
bit the dust.
Yes, it did. Crash, crash, crash. And, I think they were trying to get cough drops out of it because they like to play with those cough drops.
Yeah.
And had slowly moved it and moved it and moved it and then finally just moved it too far.
What's happening now? Ooh, Look what happened.
I broke it, made a loud noise. I didn't like that.
Yeah, but it's a learning experience for everybody involved here. I think, I don't think of them as feral. I think they, even Mimsy is still pretty young, only 2 years old. So, she's still learning. She still gets her hyper, oh my God, zoomies type of deal, just like any cat. And just patience and, continuing to show them love, but being stern when they are doing something you don't want them to do, which, is kind of like loud noise, hey, you, Mimsy, down, and then, take them down right away.
Yeah. As I've said to Tim, I'm very bad at this, which is why my cat was so ill-behaved.
Would you have been the type of parent that would have, like, their 13-year-old kid yelling at them at the grocery store?
Probably, and I would probably think it was cute, right?
Shut up, Mom.
I'd be like, oh, you're so cute. That's how it was with Sherman. It was like he was so cute, I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, I love it, though. I mean, I this morning, though, you see certain things that you don't want to see with people that you love sometimes. And Annie was resting on my chest this morning, purr, biscuits, and all that stuff. And then she got up and then turned around, and her butthole was like right close to my face. And I'm like, whoa, back. It's kind of like a Roger Corman 3D effect going on, And then before I know it, like she walked or something, and her butthole flexed. And I'm like, oh my God, that is the grossest damn thing I've ever seen.
I've seen a cat's butthole flex before.
Yeah, it's just like it coming out trying to give you a kiss, and I don't need you to kiss my glasses. I'd have to burn them, and it's the only pair I got right now.
I think that's cute. You know how mother cats get their baby cats to go to the bathroom? They lick their butts.
I'm glad humans never had to do that. Yeah, I'd be like, can we get a dog? No.
I think they do. Puppies do the same thing.
Yeah, just stimulated or something,
Yeah, it's just sort of.
Yeah. And
makes them remember they have a butthole, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Annie is getting big.
Yeah, she's almost the size of Mimsy now.
That is... Wow, my little baby's growing up.
I know, and she's only been around for, 2 weeks?
Almost a month.
Almost a month, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's 6 months old, so now she's 7 months old. Mm-hmm. She has grown a lot, it seems like.
Yeah. Still growing. She's healthy. She's out there causing a ruckus, damn it. Anyway. But those are the kitties. That's the kitty update this week, folks. Annie and Mimsy, always here to entertain themselves.
That's right. They're very entertaining to themselves.
Yes, even when they sleep together, all snuggled up, like, oh, you're the best, you know.
Mm-hmm. They're so cute when they snuggle up together.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We got a sad topic to start out with this week. The passing of a professional wrestling legend, Khosrow Vaziri. The Iron Sheik has passed away at the age of 83.
Wow, 83. That's pretty good for a wrestler.
For someone who was once called the Keith Richards of wrestling, yeah, it's very good he got to that age.
Why was he called that?
He had a lot of fun with drugs once he was introduced to them when he moved to America.
I see.
Yeah, and it's part of I was going to bring up a couple of stories here, so why not dive in? He is a legit wrestling athlete. He was part of the 1968 Iranian wrestling team. I believe they won a gold medal, but I could be mistaken on that. He was a bodyguard for the Shah of Iran. The American-backed politician, and that ended really well for Iran and the Middle East overall, right? But essentially his job was kind of like the Secret Service, but at one point he got word that the Shah didn't like him anymore, which didn't mean he's going to get fired. It meant he had to find a new place to live. So he moved to America, moved to Minnesota, and met up with a guy named Vern Gagne, who was head of the American Wrestling Association, and essentially had him do some coaching for some amateur wrestling that he supported in the local region there, which did have effects for his business for professional wrestling, because the Iron Sheik trained to become a wrestler the same year as Ric Flair.
No.
Yep.
Did they train together?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. It was horrific training, but it's one of those types of trainings that if you can get through with it, you're going to do it for life, because it was in the middle of a barn in Minnesota in the winter. And they would have to do like a 5-mile run. They'd have to do like calisthenics. They would have to, go in the ring and take bumps. That's, falling flat on your back. It's, how they ultimately protect themselves. But they had to do that hundreds of times. And then they had to do other things, hundreds of, just physically grueling. So one of those deals, like back in the day especially, they wanted to make sure that people who wanted to get into the business understood that it wasn't going to be easy. And I think that is pretty fair thing to say. Now, do people have to go the route of what Hulk Hogan had to experience? Hulk Hogan, the first time he walked in to be trained for wrestling, the trainer broke his leg. But Hogan ultimately came back after his leg healed, and then the trainer ended up, giving him proper training. But Iron Sheik, back to him. He, of course, started hitting it big in the 80s when he first became a heel, and Vince McMahon ultimately called him the Iron Sheik. He, because of his legitimate wrestling background, he was able to get the title from Bob Backlund. The Iron Sheik was essentially an interim champion. Bob Backlund didn't want to lose to Hulk Hogan, and it didn't really make sense for a good guy to face a good guy in that era anyway, so I get it. So Bob Backlund lost to the Iron Sheik only for a month later for Hulk Hogan to defeat the Iron Sheik for his first championship.
Sure.
Yeah, but there's also intrigue behind that too, because Vern Gagne again called up the Iron Sheik before that match with Hogan in 1984, and said, "I will give you $100,000 if you break his leg in the ring and bring me the WWF title." Iron Sheik said no. And the rest is history from there. In 87, he was set to feud with a guy by the name of Hacksaw Jim Duggan, but was fired because him and Hacksaw Jim Duggan got arrested for cocaine possession in an era where good guys and bad guys were not supposed to be riding together.
Right.
But that interaction...
Because kayfabe.
Exactly, you remember. But that actually helped a couple years later make Vince McMahon realize that maybe I should just say what we really do, because at the time, they didn't want to break the illusion, and they thought it would be a big deal, but nobody really talked about it, because
everybody
the audience knew. Yes, and
it wasn't a surprise.
Yeah, and at that point, once they were able to say, this is what we do, then they could explore whatever region they really wanted to do, as their imagination would go. But so there was that. Speaking of drugs, he came back in 91 and was there for a while, but then Vince McMahon pulled him into his office and goes, Sheik, I gotta tell you, you tested positive for cocaine. Iron Sheik's reaction was, yes, I told you it would be positive. And it had to be explained to him that it showed
positive was done negative.
Exactly. So he did get fired again from there, but he ended up coming back in 96 to help this young guy in the business who his wife used to babysit by the name of The Rock.
Oh, The Rock.
Yes.
The Rock, do you think The Rock is probably the most famous of all former wrestlers who have become actors?
In terms of financial, yes. In terms of ability, I think Dave Bautista, the actor who plays Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, I think he has much more range as an actor, and he's done some movies that I think would really surprise you.
Yeah, like what?
He did what is that one? With an M. Night Shyamalan movie that he just had recently. He was really good in that. He was also a Bond henchman in one of the Bond movies. Not a big role, but he made his presence felt. And he did a direct video movie with Sylvester Stallone. I believe it was Escape Plan 3.
Escape Plan 3.
Yeah, but those...
If the first two escape plans didn't get you out of your situation...
The third time's a charm.
Check out Escape Plan 3.
So...
Do you keep finding yourself in situations you need to escape from? If so, check out Escape Plan 3.
With Dave Bautista. Anyway... but yeah, the Iron Sheik.
I would be willing to watch Escape Plan 3.
Then have this conversation now, or no? No.
No, I'm just saying that could be amusing. Escape Plan 3.
Yeah, I mean, Stallone at this point, I think, finally gets what he can bring to action roles. I mean, there was a time where, he thought a little highly of himself in the 80s at least. But I think, he's put out some really good films. Expendables, especially. I love those.
Yeah, I haven't seen those. I should watch those.
No, I showed you one once, and within 5 minutes...
Well, that tends to happen no matter what you show me.
Yeah. The Iron Sheik is a legend, did have a nasty drug habit, which, did ultimately get spurred up big time because his oldest daughter, unfortunately, was the victim of domestic violence. So...
As an adult?
Yeah, as an adult. Oh. And, that would affect anybody.
Yeah.
Good news is he was able to get clean at the end of his life and essentially became a cantankerous old man. Mm-hmm. Like Mondays can go fuck themselves. I take the Rob Ford, the Ford, because he went to Toronto when Rob Ford was still the mayor there, the crack smoking mayor.
Oh,
I go to Rob Ford's office. I put him in camel clutch. I break his back. I humble him. I fuck him in the ass. And he would, just say such things about Hulk Hogan too. But there's a funny clip from Hulk Hogan on the Howard Stern show where, he talks about the Sheik, and the Sheik is on the phone yelling at him this time, and Hogan's laughing. He's like, I get this all the time. He says this, and he comes to me and he says, I love you, man. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have a career. And then at the end of the call, they both said, I love you to each other. So it's just the Sheik was just loved being the cantankerous old man. And I loved when I was on Twitter, following his Twitter page and just seeing all the outlandish things he would put out, because it was a cantankerous old man, but it made you laugh and it made you smile. And you did feel, even though he was telling everybody to go fuck themselves, that it was coming from a good place, if that makes sense. It was meant to bring sunshine to your life in a dark way.
Oh, right. Gotcha. Well, I'm sure he really identified with his character after playing it for that long.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody with a cursory knowledge of pro wrestling, especially wrestlers from that era, know that, yeah, they did a lot of the successful ones kind of become the characters, for good or bad, but yeah, that's a story for another show. The Dark Side of the Ring, season 4 is out on Vice.
Nice.
Yep.
Do we have the capability? Do we have the technology to watch this?
Through YouTube, yes, but it has to be relatively quickly after the episode's released.
Right.
Pirates! But anyway, move on to our main topic here, and it all started from listening to Countdown with Keith Olbermann, the podcast. He was always a personality on TV that I liked. He first made it big as being one of the main anchors for SportsCenter in the early 90s. When you think of that, stereotypical sportscaster delivering jokes kind of guy, he created that format.
Did he have a tweed jacket?
He may have. I wasn't looking at the types of jackets they wore.
Of course he won't. But I would be interested because it seems like that kind of person always has a tweed jacket. And maybe it's because Bear Bryant wore tweed jackets.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, he was a sports fan and all that, but, he ended up transitioning to news commentary with MSNBC, becoming one of their top-rated hosts there, but ultimately, after clashes with management, ended up leaving, did a stint on Current TV, Al Gore's news network, before they sold that to Al Jazeera, and he left there on acrimonious terms, got back into sports broadcasting, but now he's back on podcasting with Countdown, and I like this version of him because a lot of it is the I don't give a fuck version, where he's just giving his he's in his mid-60s now. He has no real desire, I'm sure, to go back into a regular TV gig. So getting paid a few $1,000s to record stuff at home, I'm sure he feels great about, with all the money he saved too. But he's talking about people in the industry, like the guy who was just fired as president of CNN, Chris Licht. He said, Chris Licht, used to be a producer for Joe Scarborough, and everybody at MSNBC thought the guy ate paste.
Huh.
And the reason he brought him up is that Chris Licht had just been fired as the president of CNN after a year of trying to take a left-of-center type of point-of-view network and turn it into a middle-of-the-road thing, which to the left-of-center people might as well just turn it into Newsmax, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And they ended up bringing in people like Donald Trump for a town hall, which went so well that they got lower ratings than, the other thing that was on the air at that particular time.
Well, Trump always said he got the best ratings.
Yeah, it tells the truth at all times, right? Mm-hmm. But Keith ended up doing a little comment about the fact that this myth of a news channel that can just deliver the news without an agenda is not going to ever happen. And if you think about it, how would you want a reporter, or how would a reporter today report World War II? Are they going to go and, get Hitler's comments for a thing, or are they going to say what they're doing is bad? Mm-hmm. You take a reporter today, how are they going to report the Civil War? There are times to where it is important to have advocacy journalism, for instance, but it's also not a bad thing to know what audience you want to go for. If you want to go for a progressive audience, go for a progressive audience. Just tell the truth. Have people that are on the air, whether it's the analyst or whatever, have notes that, in terms of references of stuff that they talked about to show that the opinions they're giving are at least based on something, references or something like that. And that got me to thinking, this is a long-winded story to get here, folks, but that got me to thinking about biases. It's a topic that I've been wanting to do on the show for a while now, and it made me think, especially with what is in the news with Trump. We have the people are already declaring their candidacy for presidency. I think now is as good a time as any to talk about the various different biases out there, because we are all biased in some way, shape, or form. It's just important to recognize the different type of biases that are out there so we can be more mindful of people, of more than just our existence in our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps us to know what to ask ourselves when something crops up about, like, oh, I really disagree with that, or oh, that makes me angry that you said that. And to sort of look beyond those immediate emotional responses and get how you're actually have a cognitive problem. Like, it's a cognitive issue. Something not firing correctly in your brain is resulting in you not being able to recognize these biases in yourself.
Yes, so what we did, we went to our trusty friends at Psychology Today, found an article that was written by Christopher Dwyer, PhD. That's why I got screwed up there. And the article is called 12 Common Biases That Affect How We Make Everyday Decisions. And for articles like this, we're going to do what we normally do, bounce back and forth here, read a bit from the article. A lot of this is, good bullet point stuff anyway, so we're going to be reading a lot from it, but giving you our thoughts as well. I mean, we're not a transcription service, folks.
That's right. So we're going to go through these 12 common biases, and you can see which ones you've experienced and which ones maybe you haven't, and see how it might help you to try and think about things from a different perspective.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind about this article too, the article, the link will be in the show notes, so you can go and you can find the link that will take you to Psychology Today, because I believe, off the top of my head, in the article itself, near the end, they have a link to take a test, to test your biases out there. If they do not, I will double check after we are done recording. And if they do not, I know they have those tests out there anyway, that are online tests, free to take. And, just something that if you answer honestly, you can get an honest, like the first time I took it, was like, whoa, it's like, yeah, I got some work to do,
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are really cool things to do to sort of get at biases. This is a little bit different from implicit biases.
Yeah.
Which are these sort of biases that we don't acknowledge that we're having. These are more thought patterns that ultimately determine what you're going to believe or think about an issue. So it's a little bit different in terms of bias. I think it gets confusing when they use the word bias, actually.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. But like always, we'll bounce back and forth here. So, did you want to take odds or evens?
I will take odds.
Ooh, you sound excited on that one.
Yes. So we're going to start with the Dunning-Kruger effect. So this is where experts are often aware of what they know and don't know. Aware of what they don't know, and hopefully engage their intellectual honesty and humility in this fashion. Meaning not overstating what you know. In this sense, the more you know, the less confident you're likely to be, not out of lacking knowledge, but due to caution. And I would say not only caution, but due to knowing how much there is to know in the world. On the other hand, if you know only a little about something, you see it simplistically, biasing you to believe that the concept is easier to comprehend than it may actually be.
So basically, it would be you talking about lawyer stuff compared to me talking about lawyer stuff. Because I don't know the law, whereas you do. So if we're, talking about something.
But I mean, you took a business law class.
You get my point, though.
Well, I think it's interesting because some people who would have taken a business law class would feel like they knew enough about the law to talk about it. That they could say maybe something like, oh, you're supposed to get paid every hour that you work until 40, and then anything over 40, you get time and a half overtime for. Because you know that that's a requirement of the law because of your business law class. But you don't know all the subtleties that might go into actually determining whether that's true or not true.
Yeah, there's facts and then there's truths.
Right.
Yeah.
There's facts and then there's truths.
Because I was just reminded of that because Keith Olbermann had a story in regards to that in the episode that I was referring to earlier of how he got fired from Fox Sports in the late 90s. And it involved a Roger Clemens video. And what happened was a fan took a video of an incident where a fan just yelled at Roger Clemens and insulted his family, and then Roger Clemens got into his face. No, fists were thrown or anything like that. But somebody took a video, but did not have the start of what actually happened of the fan instigating the incident. They started the video when Roger Clemens got into the guy's face. So the fact on the video was that, yeah, Roger Clemens got into this guy's face, but the truth was he was legitimately provoked.
Right.
And his producers at Fox wanted to run it, but, he was the one who paid money for that particular tape, and so he technically owned it. So he said no, and he lost the job.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. I think I can see how that plays out for folks. What it says to me is that people who are confident often have no idea what they're talking about. And people who are meek or qualify their opinion are much smarter. So in terms of like whose opinion am I going to believe? Let's say if I'm looking at a news source, somebody who is more humble and more acknowledging of the complexities of the world, I'm going to like a lot better than somebody who's a bonehead and a blowhard and just talks to hear himself talk. The problem is there's so many people out there, and not to pick on men, but I notice it. I notice how much space men take up and how much energy they suck out of the room anytime they're nearby. Sorry, Tim.
Sorry.
The ones who are not aware of their toxic masculinity or their terrible privilege, they're not doing the work of seeing themselves in a larger context. They're just like pleasing themselves.
Yeah. They show up to work in their Dodge Rams and the waft of Axe body spray comes out of the truck.
Right. And you just look at people like that and you're like, what do you think is going on in the world?
I don't know. Some people.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yes, let's move on to number 2.
Number 2, confirmation bias. Just because the author put the Dunning-Kruger effect in the number 1 spot does not mean he considers it the most commonly engaged bias. It is an interesting effect, sure, but in the author's critical thinking classes, the confirmation bias is the one he constantly warns students about. We all favor ideas that confirm our existing beliefs and what we think we know. Likewise, when we conduct research, we all suffer from trying to find sources that justify what we believe about the subject. This bias brings to light the importance of, as the author discussed in his previous post on 5 tips for critical thinking, playing devil's advocate. That is, we must overcome confirmation bias and consider both sides, or if there are more than 2, all sides of the story. Remember, we are cognitively lazy. We don't like changing our knowledge, schema structures, and how we think about things. And I would say, yeah, this is a bias that a lot of Americans definitely suffer from. I've suffered and will probably continue to suffer, but I think I'm a lot more mindful now of like where I'm getting my news.
Yep.
And I was, as someone who professed listening to Keith Olbermann still, I mean, I was someone that did focus a lot more on the personalities, commenting on the news.
Right.
And there's a place for that. I don't think they should be banned or anything like that. But, they need ratings. They don't want a charity. And the way they're going to keep you coming back each and every night is, death, destruction, AIDS, whatever. Find out why at 11. Mm-hmm. Instead of actually talking about the news or, bringing Keith Olbermann again. He was at MSNBC during the whole Lewinsky thing. And, he talked about how he got really upset at the times where they had to really essentially keep on reporting the same things because nothing new was happening.
Yeah.
But that stoked a furor in this country that, we've seen multiple times played out since then in different ways, up to and including Trump being, indicted.
Absolutely. I mean, the country was primed for Trump because everybody had been in an echo chamber, which is another kind of thought of confirmation bias. It's like when everybody's saying the same thing, you're just echoing off of each other this exact same information, and it feels like different information because different people are saying it, but it's the exact same information.
It's like work meetings. Every time I've been to a work meeting, it always has employee. I want to comment on what this person said by stating the exact same thing they said, but in the way I would say it.
Right. Yes, or in classrooms. That's of course where I see it. This kind of approach. So. Yeah, confirmation bias. It's a really bad one. So I think the country was primed because this confirmation bias had been going on for so long, and the corporate world has to be benefiting from it in some way because they poke the fervor, and like you said, it's for ratings. Mm-hmm. And it's not to inform people. It's not. There's nothing noble about it anymore. Like, I think journalism used to be a noble profession, and now I think it's hard. And there are lots of good journalists out there, but it's just like lawyers, kind of like everybody hates lawyers because there are some really, really dick lawyers out there. And I think it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't help when you have the President of the United States calling the press the enemy of the people. Either. I mean, they're supposed to poke the bear. They're supposed to ask the questions. And, it's scary just how much corporate influence is keeping these reporters from reporting on some stories. Because, it does happen that, hey, my pocketbook over here is going to be affected by advertisers leaving because you're talking about this particular story. We're not going to run it.
It's almost like when Trump, most recently after his arraignment, went to lunch, and there were tons of reporters there. Mm-hmm. And a reporter asked a question that Trump did not like, and the Trump supporters, physically pushed her out of the restaurant.
Yeah, I heard the audio of that. Do you expect to be in jail? She was a British reporter, so the British reporters have more balls than American reporters do. I mean, it's like reporters seem to, and I get it. If you want continued access to a candidate, if your job is to continue to get that access, you don't want to piss them off too much, but you're not their friend.
Right.
You're supposed to talk about them, good or bad,
Right.
Anyway. What's the next one here?
Next one, number 3. Self-serving bias. Ever fail an exam because your teacher hates you? Ever go in the following week and ace the next one because you studied extra hard despite the teacher? Congratulations, you've engaged in the self-serving bias. We attribute successes and positive outcomes to our doing, basking in our own glory when things go right. But when we face failure and negative outcomes, we tend to attribute these events to other people or contextual factors outside of ourselves.
Isn't that true? No.
I mean, I think it's absolutely true. I've often taken the explanation that is about me. Because I think this is also kind of like making everything about you. Mm-hmm. Like, why would that teacher be out to get you? Right? Like, why? That's obviously not happening. And so why are you jumping to that conclusion?
I mean, I'm reminded right now of, like, hearing about some actions from one of my kids towards other people. And it is easy for a person to want to look for another explanation as to why, instead of, in the example they gave in the paragraph here of, why not just say, I didn't study hard enough, or just didn't remember the facts I needed to pass, instead of the teacher hates me, because it has to be the teacher. It couldn't be me. I studied hard enough, and it's easy to get lost up in that emotion because it stings. You don't want to fail a test. You don't want to, do something bad or anything like that. But the quicker you can focus on that, focus on the reality, I guess, is the important thing. And that takes work. I mean, and that's a constant struggle because, if we're talking like, an issue, I guess, with a friend, for a long time, it's like, it's easy to defend yourself. I don't know. I mean, you get my point here. It's just, this is one you have to really watch out for.
Yeah, I agree, because we want to believe that we did good, mm-hmm. and we don't want to believe that we did bad, right? Like, it's very black and white, good and bad. I want to be good. I don't want to be bad. It must be somebody else's fault if I'm bad. But it's all about me if I do well. Yep. It wasn't that my teacher taught me what I needed to know. It was that I studied really hard. Acknowledge the professor, damn it. No, I'm just saying there's it's not about what actually happened. It's about you feeling good about yourself. Which, I think we want people to do. And I think a lot of times, especially for women, it's been my experience talking to women, that there is this tendency to think we're bad. Right? That we're not good. And so it kind of turns this self-serving bias on its head and it becomes sort of a self-deprecating bias. And I think that either of those biases are equally destructive. Mm-hmm. Whether you're always believing you're bad or you're always believing you're good. And it's the other people that are bad or the other people that are good, and it can never be you. You can never attain that, whatever. Yep. Anywho. All right. Let's move on to the next one here. The curse of knowledge and hindsight bias. Captain Hindsight. That's exactly what I was going to do. Captain Hindsight. Similar in ways to the availability heuristic and to some extent the false consensus effect, once you truly understand a new piece of information, that piece of information is now available to you and often becomes seemingly obvious. It might be easy to forget that there was ever a time you didn't know this information, and so you assume that others, like yourself, also know this information. The curse of knowledge. However, it is often an unfair assumption that others share the same knowledge. The hindsight bias is similar to the curse of knowledge in that once we have information about an event, it seems obvious that it was going to happen all along. I should have seen it coming. Like my marriage. Yeah, I mean, I think this often happens in relationships, right? Where we're like, once it happens, it's like, oh, yeah, what was I thinking? Yeah, and when it comes to the curse of knowledge as well, I mean, I find that a lot with, like my pop culture interest. Like, I've watched wrestling for so long that it shocks me that people are like, Hulk who? It's like, what? How could you not know? Right, like if it's your whole world... it's just, so it becomes interesting how many different things there are to be concerned about in the world. Indeed. Yeah. And you just got to find the ones that make you happy to be worried about. Or it can make you a lot of money. Anyway, what is the next one? Next one is the optimism and or pessimism bias. As you probably guessed from the name, we have a tendency to overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes, particularly if we're in good humor, and to overestimate the likelihood of negative outcomes if we're feeling down or have a pessimistic attitude. In either the case of optimism or pessimism, be aware that emotions can make thinking irrational. Remember one of my 5 tips for critical thinking: leave emotion at the door. Okay, so this is about, if I feel it's a glass half empty, glass half full parable, or whatever that's called. Mm-hmm. If you have a positive attitude, things are going to seem positive to you. If you have a negative attitude, things are going to seem negative to you. Seems pretty simple.
And one thing I'm thinking of here is NRE when it comes to this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because like early on in relationships, you're like just meeting a person, you've known them for 2 weeks, but they're the most specialist person in the world and you're going to be with them forever. Everything's positive, everything's great, until the feelings change 6 months down the road and it's just like, it's going to be the worst, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of parallels.
Yeah, and that's probably where it comes up the most for me. So I was definitely thinking about that too.
Okay. Shall I go on to the next one?
Yes, this is my favorite one.
All right. The professor's favorite. Here we go. Dun, 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 dun. We need special music. The sunk cost fallacy. Though labeled a fallacy, the author sees sunk cost as just as much in tune with bias as faulty thinking, given the manner in which we think in terms of winning, losing, and breaking even. For example, we generally believe that when we put something in, we should get something out, whether it's effort, time, or money. With that, sometimes we lose, and that's it. We get nothing in return. A sunk cost refers to something lost that cannot be recovered. Our aversion to losing makes us irrationally cling to the idea of regaining, even though it has already been lost, known in gambling as chasing the pot. When we make a bet and chase after it, perhaps making another bet to recoup the original and hopefully more, even though rationally we should consider the initial bet as out-and-out loss. The appropriate advice of cutting your losses is applicable here. Again, I think everybody in that point has had something happen in their lives that just went south, and you think, if I just do this, it will make it better. And 9 times out of 10, it makes it worse. And that can apply to a lot of things. I mean, that can apply to like a relationship. That could apply to, money. I mean, gambling, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm a little short this month, but if I go to the casino and spend this amount, maybe I'll get something more in return, or lottery tickets or something like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel this comes up in relationships too, because it's like, I've been with you for 3 years. I know you really well. I understand the positives and the negatives. I've spent 2 years with you. That's a sunk cost. I've given up the opportunity cost of those 2 years. I could have been doing something other than hanging out with you, right?
What are you trying to say?
And so then if I'm like, should I break up with this person or should I stay with this person? It becomes harder and harder to break up with someone the longer you've been with them because of the sunk cost fallacy. This idea that, I've invested so much already. I just need to invest a little bit more and things will get better.
Mm.
And this is a fallacy, right? So,
but I mean, it is because I can tell you from my experience, hindsight being 20/20, the signs were all there. I knew it deep in my heart that things were not working out, and I should have at a much earlier time severed ties, and I think everybody would have been a lot happier, but I can't rewind, and I just got to accept my losses and move on. I have the ability to move on, and I should be thankful for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like how you think and your attitude have a lot to do with several of these.
It's as stated with the one you previously read, the optimism pessimism one, of course. I mean, if you're depressed and in a bad mood, then it's always going to fail. It's never going to work. Why should I do it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which has to do with the next one, which is negativity bias. So negativity bias is not totally separate from pessimism bias, which we talked about a little bit ago, but it is subtly and importantly distinct. In fact, it works according to similar mechanics as the sunk cost fallacy, in that it reflects our profound aversion to losing. We like to win, but we hate to lose even more. So when we make a decision, we generally think in terms of outcomes, either positive or negative. The bias comes into play when we irrationally weigh the potential for a negative outcome as more important than that of a positive outcome. So when we say, I'm going to protect myself rather than put myself out there kind of thing. Like, you have to take a risk in order to be successful.
Think of how many people have been cheated on and then, have to take a year or 2 or 3 to get enough courage to be able to trust somebody else to, have a relationship with again. I mean, think of how many people have decided to just sit at home and play a video game or hang out with their cats or something like that because they didn't want to risk it because that next person could do the same thing as the person that you gave your heart to. And they crapped on it and flushed it down the toilet,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to avoid that.
I would hope so, yeah. I mean,
unless you're really masochistic.
Yeah, that would not be a pleasant person to be around, I would think.
No.
So do something positive, you jackass. Anyway. All right, shall I go on with the next one?
Yes, let's go on.
Okay, the decline bias, a.k.a. declinism.
I think so.
Okay. You may have heard the complaint that the internet will be the downfall of information dissemination. Ooh, multiple syllables. Yeah, sexy. But Socrates reportedly said the same thing about the written word. Declinism refers to a bias in favor of the past over and above how things are going. Similarly, you might know a member of an older generation who prefaces grievances with, well, back in my day, before following up with how things are supposedly getting worse. The decline bias may result from something the author has mentioned repeatedly in his post. We don't like change. People like their worlds to make sense. They like things wrapped up in nice, neat little packages. Our world is easier to engage with when things make sense to us. When things change, so must the way in which we think about them, and because we are cognitively lazy. We try our best to avoid changing our thought processes. How true today more than any other time that I've lived. But I say this as a privileged white guy, I'm seeing it a lot more openly now than I've ever saw it before.
Well,
just this idea. I mean, make America great again. Come on, decline bias in its title.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so this really annoys me, and I really try not to do it as I'm getting older. Because it's the worst thing to be a young person and be told, you don't know, but this terrible thing is going to happen to you. Your life is going to suck. You're going to be unhappy. Which is what older people are sort of telling younger people when they say, well, back in my day, we had to eat corn 5 days a week. That's all we had to eat. Okay, what does that have to do with what your granddaughter is able to do now and have a varied diet? Like, why wouldn't you be happy about that as opposed to just wanting to show how much you suffered?
I don't get it. I mean, we've talked about it with other things as well. Like, I don't get it. I can't wrap my head around it,
Right.
And I mean, part of me understands it because, like, the easiest way I think people can get a glimpse into that mindset is through music. Everybody gets to a point where they do have a general cutoff. Sure, the older you get, there may be a couple of new artists that come along that catch your ear, but generally you get to a certain age and then your music tastes are set.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think that is, I guess, something to keep in mind overall, especially when it comes to regular life too, because things in some ways were much simpler back in the 90s, but I absolutely love being able to carry one device that's going to have all my books, all my music. I can play video games. I can watch TV on here. I would not pass that up for anything. I mean, that is amazing.
Well, I think, I think part of this bias is, one, rose-colored glasses. As we look back, things always look better than they do right now. Or not always, but like they tend to look better than they did at the time. This happens to me constantly, where I'm like, oh, I loved going to that and doing that last year. I'm going to do it even more this year. When in reality, I had a pretty hard time with it last year. And so why do I think I want to do it more? Well, it's the same thing. It's like the past is better than in my mind than it actually was.
South Park did an episode on it.
I'm sure.
It was the first episode of them in 4th grade, and that's where they tried to get Timmy's wheelchair made into a time machine because they wanted to go back to 3rd grade, and Cartman had a whole song and dance number about 3rd grade and all that stuff. But Timmy did travel back in time alone, but the kids ultimately realized that 3rd grade kind of sucked with Mr. Garrison. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so sometimes I find myself doing the same thing where I'm like, what? Can I see this for what it really was? And then the other thing is, yes, the 90s seemed like a much simpler time, because guess what? We were in our early 20s. I was graduating from high school in 1992. Mm-hmm. So all of the 90s, I was a young adult. My life was pretty fucking simple. Right? I just had to work, I had to pay rent, like all this basic stuff. But not any of this like self-actualization or dealing with your feelings or learning how to communicate with people. Like I didn't learn those things until much later. And so yeah, life was simpler. I was the center of my own universe.
Yeah. Those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. All right, what's the next one?
Number 9 is the backfire effect.
Just like that joke. Go ahead.
The backfire effect refers to the strengthening of a belief even after it has been challenged. Cook and Lewandowski, 2011, explained it very well in the context of changing people's minds in their debunking handbook. The backfire effect may work based on the same foundation as declinism, in that we do not like change. It is also similar to negativity bias in that we wish to avoid losing and other negative outcomes. In this case, one's idea is being challenged or rejected, perceived as being made out to be wrong, and thus they may hold on tighter to the idea than they had before. However, there are caveats to the backfire effect. For example, we tend to abandon a belief if there's enough evidence against it with regard to specific facts. So, if my idea is, the people should be able to occupy all the public lands whenever they want to do whatever they want with them, and somebody tells me, no, that's not what the law says, then I'm going to be like, fuck you, it is what the law says. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just makes you more... People arguing with you at all makes you defensive.
Oh, I had a little bit of that today because the other day I actually recorded an episode of my sister's podcast with her and her co-host, Their Voices. And as soon as that episode is released, we will promote that in the various ways that we do. But brought up the fact that, there was a big Kelvinator plant in our neighborhood. That, if it wasn't already closed down, it probably closed down like a year or two before, I have recall of memories or something like that. But it was soon enough that people were still talking about how much, the loss of that plant really hurt in terms of, the jobs going away. But the Kelvinator company were the first company that came out with refrigerators as we know them today. Mm-hmm. And, again, an important part of Grand Rapids history there, but I was under the assumption that in Indiana Jones 4, the refrigerator he got into was a Kelvinator. It was actually inspired by the Kelvinator, but, they used their own custom, logo for for, the refrigerator so they could own the copyright or something like that.
Right.
Because Kelvinator is still, the company itself is long gone, but they still use the name for like refrigerators and stuff like that. But when my sister sent it and, said, "Oh, you were wrong about that," my first reaction was, "Bitch, shut up." No. but taking a breath, did some research, because I thought I heard it somewhere. Fuck you. And it was inspired by.
Yeah.
So I was wrong.
All right. Well, let's hear about number 10.
Number 10, the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error is similar to the self-serving bias in that we look for contextual excuses for our failures, but generally blame other people or their characteristics for their failures. It also may stem from the availability heuristic in that we make judgments based only on the information we have available at hand. One of the best textbook examples of this integrates stereotyping. And I think we all have stories that we could relate in terms of this, in terms of the stereotypes we've seen, put through in media, like dumb blonde. Anybody? That is a stereotype, benign compared to others. But if you're a blonde, I'm sure it would suck. Everybody assuming that you're dumb when you're not, Mm-hmm. Even if you were dumb, you shouldn't have somebody, constantly say you're dumb because of your hair color. No. How does that make sense?
Right. And so this is like viewing a characteristic as connected to an outcome.
Yeah.
That it's not connected to.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that somebody was dumb doesn't mean that all people that look like them are dumb, and it doesn't mean that all dumb people look like them.
Mm-hmm. They did give one example that I cut for brevity, but I can summarize it, of a guy passing another car and seeing a woman in the car, and the car is driving erratically somewhat, and the guy's assumption is women are bad drivers, without taking the time to actually look in the back seat and see she has a couple kids she's dealing with as well. It doesn't mean her actions were good, but she is one specific person doing one thing. Her actions don't represent womanhood everywhere.
Right. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to think what he would think if it was a man driving the car. Like, would you just be like, "Oh, that guy's an asshole"?
If Brock Lesnar's driving, it's like, "Hi, Mr. Lesnar, sir." Anyway. Any more comment on that, or would you like to go to the next one here?
Well, I think, it's the other things. There are just tons of examples of this, right? Mm-hmm. We blame other people for their failures. Absolutely. And so when things are going bad for someone, we might assume it's all people that's going to, all people that have that characteristic. The classic example that I remember from the war on crime or tough on crime period of the 90s was, black people are more likely to commit crimes. And, like, if you're a black person, sorry, you're more likely to commit crimes.
Without taking the time to dive deep into the numbers, because it's not a simple... It's too simple. It's insultingly simple to say black people are more violent. Take the time to dig deep, and you will find out, that when you have police departments that primarily patrol, black neighborhoods, and, justice is not equal, that is the wrong thing to say. Because it's just simply not true. The facts don't show that to be true whatsoever. And I think, too, isn't it like this quote-unquote black-on-black crime statistically, isn't that damn near the same as white-on-white crime, yet they don't report white-on-white crime in the news?
Right. Yes, absolutely. So I think we can all think of examples of that.
Of what?
fundamental attribution error.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about in-group bias.
All right.
As we have seen through consideration of the self-serving bias and the fundamental attribution error, we have a tendency to be relatively kind when making judgments about ourselves. Simply, in-group bias refers to the unfair favoring of someone from one's own group. You might think that you're unbiased, impartial, and fair, but we also come to this bias having evolved to be this way. That is, from an evolutionary perspective, this bias can be considered an advantage, favoring and protecting those similar to you, particularly with respect to kinship and the promotion of one's own line. So, yeah, this is basically like gorillas wandering around going, ooh, 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 at each other. Right? You're not part of my group. The in-group bias is like so strong in America.
You're a nerd. Starts early.
Yeah, right? So, it's the haves and the have-nots. It's the, funny people and people who aren't funny. It's people who are smart and people who struggle with academics.
The rock fans and the rap fans. I mean, but doesn't mean there's not intermingling between the two, but, they, like anybody, would generally cling together. The Star Trek fans versus the Star Wars fans. Same thing.
Right.
So I would say probably, isn't inherently bad, but it's something you should watch out for too, because like I'm discovering music-wise, just being part of the in-group in terms of what I listen to, I didn't take the time to dive out and investigate more. I mean, I think I did fairly well compared to some people, but I've been thinking lately of that movie that we saw, I believe it's still on Disney Plus, that was produced by Questlove, Summer of Soul. Mm-hmm. That, essentially the Black Woodstock in Harlem that sat in a vault. Mm-hmm. That sat in a fucking vault, when, that was just as exciting, if not more so, than Woodstock. Woodstock had its boring periods. It was a 4-hour damn movie, Mm-hmm. But, just be mindful, right?
Yeah, you just gotta... When you feel like something is right or wrong, you just got to be careful about these biases and just interrogate yourself. Am I assuming this person is going to be better at this job because this person looks like me? Or do I assume that somebody's going to be a better dancer because they look like me? Or whatever.
Yep. All right. Should we dive into the last one?
Last one.
The last one. Number 12, the Forer effect, a.k.a. the Barnum effect. Specifically, the Forer effect refers to the tendency for people to accept vague and general personality descriptions as uniquely applicable to themselves without realizing that the same description could be applied to just about everyone else. For example, when people read their horoscope, even vague general information can seem like it's advising something relevant and specific to them. I get it, and I'm not totally against stuff like that because, you can read something silly, and if that gives you a smile and makes you do something happy that turns into a positive effect, is it really bad? But I like anything, I think, with the example they gave there of astrology, I think, people can take that too seriously sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. So... Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as... Remember John Edwards?
Yeah.
Where he would go, and there's also a South Park episode about
I'm not the biggest douche in the world.
There she is, Miss Universe douche. Anyway, what was I going to say?
About John Edwards.
Oh, John Edwards. So, the thing would be, he would say, is there anybody here with brown hair? It's yeah, of course there are. But the people, because of this bias, they're like, oh, me. Because they think, oh, I'm the one with brown hair. Or I'm the one who, likes full moons. Or I'm the one that, when it's everybody does those things.
And, taking it's just so we don't piss off all our astrology fans, let's piss off some religious fans. You know, think about the people that like sit in the audience for like one of these faith healer types. You know, not, you know, it's like the knowledge is out there that what these faith healers like your Benny Hinn's back in the day do is complete bullshit. I mean, completely staged just as much as the WWE. But they have people there that want to believe it's going to be true, so it's true, damn it. The Lord was there.
Yeah.
Well, folks, that is the 12 list of biases that we deal with on an everyday basis. I have enjoyed talking about this discussion, and I think, you know, especially with the times we live in today, it's something that folks should kind of revisit every now and then, just because, you know, life can throw you curveballs. You know, as you've heard over 300 episodes, I've been through a few myself. And, keeping this in mind, I, in terms of, you know, what types of biases every human has to deal with, I think can be a way for you to have a more calm life, I guess, as much as you can, because you know, a lot of this is, from what we read, is based on emotions. You know, good, bad, you know, and you got to think of emotions in extreme too. You know, for certain situations like relationships, they can get pretty deep, and so they can get pretty harsh. And you know, if you keep this stuff in mind, then hopefully somewhere down the road, you know, you can make maybe some right decisions along the way, and not have things turn out so sour. You know.
Yeah, and I think it improves your relationships too, because you're not always looking for someone to blame.
Yes. Except for Andre the Giant.
Never to be forgiven.
Yeah, to quote the Sheik, I humbled the giant, I put him in the camel clutch, I break his back.
I break his back.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, anything else you want to say?
No, I just hope everybody's enjoying the summer so far. I mean, it's not even summer yet. It's still spring. I hope you are enjoying the spring.
And don't you have a big trip coming up soon?
I do. I will be headed down to the Oregon Country Fair and spending a couple weeks down there.
Yeah, she's going to be touring with the Oak Ridge Boys. No.
No, it's not like a state fair or a county fair. It's very, very different. It's like if the hippies threw a giant party on a big piece of land and there were lots of them, what would it be like?
Hey man, here's a sunflower and some Geritol. You know?
Hey man.
Anyway, I know you had a whole list put together of things. I mean, you were a list person, and me, I'm a procrastinate and wait at the last minute to grab everything I can person. You know, which is why I don't normally camp.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into camping comfortably for 2 weeks, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the type of guy that would camp as long as it was catered. You know? Anyway, so we thank you all for listening. As I mentioned too, I was recently a guest on the Their Voices podcast. As you were listening to this, if you were listening to it on the day it has come out, it is not out yet. But the moment that episode drops, we'll definitely let you know, because they are part of the Friends Talking Nerdy podcast network.
Oh, what a network it is.
Damn right. Something, I had a joke there, but, you know, we're just a little high.
Just a little high.
Anyway, I think we'll wrap it up. Each Saturday we'll have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Good night, folks.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.